Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back. Today's daf is Avodah Zarah in Beis. We begin 5 lines off the top of the Amud with a story. Hahu Gavra, there was this fellow who owned a property, and he tells his friend Shimon, the Amr le Chavrei. So he tells his friend, Shimon, Imaz binana law. If it should come, the day that I actually sell this piece of real estate, laha'ara, this land, guess what? You will be my customer. I'll come to you and offer it to you. L'cha mizavninala. I'm going to sell it to you. And actually, Rashi says, they made a kinyan. So he made a kinyan that if I sell it, it's yours from now. So it was more than just a commitment, explains the Ritva. He actually made a kinyan that if come the day I sell this property, okay, if I put this property up for sale, it's yours from today. And guess what? He turned around and sold it to somebody else. Azal, he went Zavna, Linish, Achrin, he sold to somebody else. Amr Rabbi Yosef, Kana Kama, the first fellow, Shimon, acquired the property. It's his, because he was the first buyer. Amalei Abaye. So Abaye tells Rabbi Yosef, hold it. I mean, Volai Pasak. He committed to him, but he never made a price. And without a price, there's no deal. How could you commit? There's no set value. You have no clue how much it's going to be. So any talk, any kinyan is just premature and non-committal. Says the Gemara, so how do we even know this? That when there's no pasak, when there's no set value, there's no set price, there can't be a kinyan. That's the Mishnah we had yesterday, right? The Snan, we had a Mishnah. If a Yid sells his wine to a guy, if there was a pasak, they set the rate before he gave it to me, before you measured it up into his kli, before he transferred the material. So he knew what he was getting himself into. He knew what it was going to cost him, and he made a kinyan mashicha. So even if he tampered with it afterwards, it became yain nesach and tainted. Dam of mataran, the wine seller can get paid for it because it already belonged to the guy. Madad actually pasach. However, if he did a medida before he made a price, dam of asurin, at that point it still belongs to the seller because the buyer has not yet really committed to it. Without knowing a rate, how could you buy something without having a price? So it still belongs to the Jewish owner. Now, if it becomes yain nesach, technically it's the seller's wine that became asur. He can't accept payment for it. Evidently, in order for a sale, for a deal to go through, you need a psika, you need a rate, you need a price. Therefore, in our case, says Abaye to Rav Yosef, how could you suggest that the first fellow is the rightful owner? True, he received a commitment, a verbal commitment, an actual kinyan commitment from the real estate owner, but until they set the price, until they agree on a rate, there's no deal. Says the Gemara, okay, my haviela. So what's the conclusion on this shaila, on this case? Says the Gemara, what do you mean, my haviela? My haviela? What do you mean? What's the conclusion? Kedekamrina. We just concluded that without known value, there's no deal. Says the Gemara, no, dilma chumra de yain nesach shani. Perhaps you can't prove anything. You can't conclude from the story of the yain nesach because maybe we treat it more severely. Chumra de yain nesach because of its Avodah Zarah connection. We're machmer. We say that it's not considered sold until the price was fully agreed upon. That we can still consider it the Yisrael's wine, which became usher, etc., etc. But in the case of the real estate commitment, perhaps it's different. So now we're going to proceed to another attempt at a raya. Whether pasak is a precondition even for other kinyanim, other items. Tashma, Damar Vida Bar Avin. So he told us like this. Uvda Hava Be Rav Chizda. There was a similar story to this in the Beis Medrash. It was brought to the Beis Medrash of Rav Chizda. This type of case where there was a kinyan without a known value. Rav Chizda Be Rav Huna, he brought it to Rav Huna. Upashtem or the Snan or the Sanya. And he clarified it based on a brayso, where in fact we say that pasak is indeed a precondition for a kinyan. So Moshe Chamorov, Apoyala, Vechnisan Tech Beisoy, we have Chamorov, the fellows leading the donkeys with the produce on it. We have the Poyalov, or the fellow has his workers. So basically we have a grain dealer with loaded donkeys and drivers bringing them into town. We have the grain dealer with his workers loaded up personally with those bags of grain. Now the customer was Moishech. He took possession, so to speak. He grabbed the donkey drivers. Here, come. Or the workers with the sacks on their backs. So he never did actual Mashiach. He never took physical possession of the sacks themselves, per se. It was only together with the person. He pulled the person, he brought the animal, Moshe Chamarav Apayal Vichnisen, even though the customer invited them into his home, Vichnisen Tech Beisai. So at this point there was no Mashiach done. Rashi says that the Mashiach has to be done on the actual produce. Ein Mashiach Koina Bivnei Adam. You can't do Mashiach on a person, even though the produce happens to be sitting on his back. There's no kinyan on the payers at this point. So now, Bein Pasak, Achale Madat. Whether he was Pasak, they set a price, but there was no Medida yet. He did not really measure up the produce. He didn't take it into his kalim. He didn't physically take possession of the wheat. So there's no kinyan. Or Ubein Madat Achale Pasak. Suppose he did do medida. He removed the sacks. He put it into his brought it into his possession. But he hadn't yet made a pasuk. There was no price set. Loikana. In both these cases, no kinyan, and therefore shneyen, ushneyen, yichoylin, lachs behem. Both the seller and the buyer can back out because there was no deal executed at this point. However, parkan v'chitzach beisay. Suppose he unloaded the sacks, parkan, v'chnisan tech beisai, and took it into his home. And Rashi says, your home is your domain. It's like Mashiach, right? A kinyan chatzar, it's in your place. Pasak achale modad, ein shnein yechoylin lachser bahen. As long as there was a pasak, even though he didn't yet measure it up, he didn't fill it into his containers with the... doesn't matter because the stuff's sitting in your house. And since there was a pasak, now it's in your home, you're kaina. However, modad actually a pasak. If he filled up his containers, but has not yet received notice of a price, he's not yet reliant on it, he's not committed to it, shneyen, yechoylin, nachsman, both, seller and buyer can back out because there's no kinyan. Clearly, pasika is a requirement for the conclusion and execution of a deal. Likewise, the fellow who promised to sell his property to Mr. X and sold it to Mr. Y, inasmuch as he committed to Mr. X, but there was no deal, because there was no pasak. Nobody had any clue about rate and price. And it's not a done deal. Another story of a fellow, the Amrle Chavrei turns to his friend and tells him, if in fact I end up selling this property, I sell it to you for $100. And what happened? He turned around and sold the same property to somebody else, but for much more money, for 120. The first fellow is considered the owner of the property because he made a kinyan. He's the first buyer. And this time, He did it right. He set a price, $100. He made a kinyan, right? Maskeflo, Rav Yaakov, he had a question. Rav Yaakov ben Pekod, he challenged the ruling of Rav Kahana. This fellow evidently wasn't really willing to sell the property for 100, right? You see, ultimately he didn't sell it for 100. He sold it for 120. It's a new deal. It's a new mindset. It's a new circumstance. Hi, this seller, Zuzi, the extra money that he got offered, the 120, Ansur, that forced him to sell it. He never committed to sell it to Reuven under these circumstances, to Shimon under these circumstances. Reuven was the seller, right? He committed to Shimon, I'll sell it to you, i.e., if I sell it for its presumed value of 100. He didn't do that. He wasn't really willing to sell it for 100. The only reason why he sold it is because somebody gave him this extravagant offer, this deal of 120. It's a totally new setting, a new circumstance, new set of circumstances. He never committed to Shimon under those circumstances. And therefore, according to this shita, it belongs to the new buyer, not to Shimon. And that's the Gemara's conclusion. The halacha is Rav Yaakov ben Pekod. He's no longer committed to the original fellow. He can stick with this deal of 120. Now let's say, new story. Reuven tells Shimon, I'll sell you the property here. And he's going to sell it to him. But in terms of determining value, kedeshaymi betlasa. You know what? We're not sure how much it's really worth. We'll have three individuals make a shuma, an evaluation, an appraisal, an estimate. And that's how we'll proceed. Kedeshaymi betlasa. So Rashi explains that typically when you say a lashon of three, it's like a bezdin, like a court. In a court, all you need is a majority. As long as 2 out of the 3, go a certain direction, that's the ruling of the court. Furthermore, since he used the lashon of shuma kedeshaymi, rather than just as will be dictated by 3. He didn't say dictated or conveyed by 3. He said the appraisal presented by 3. That sounds more like a formal type of, institutional type of, verdict. So it's a bezdin type of reference. And therefore, says the Gemara, afilu trei migoit lasa. You'll follow the ruling, the number presented by even 2 out of those 3. So even if the third fellow disagrees, we follow the majority of the 3, like in any bezdin. And the number that's cited by the 2, that determines the value, the price of the property. However, if he tells him, I'm going to sell it to you based on keda amri betlasa, based on what's dictated by 3, since he switched to amri rather than shuma, adda amri betlasa. In this case, it's not based on like an institutional verdict, based on the bezdin type of system where a majority determines. Rather, has to be dictated and conveyed by all 3 and agreed upon unanimously by all 3 individuals. Ad amri bitlas. What if he says kedeshaymi barba? According to the price, according to the shuma of 4 individuals. Now 4 is clearly not a bezdin number. See, here he literally meant he wants that all 4 will unanimously converge on a certain number. Ad amri barba. We need all 4 on board. Because otherwise, why? Why 4? What's unique about 4? V'kosh can certainly if he tells him ked amri barba, where he says it's 4 and ked amri as will be conveyed by 4, he means literally all 4 have to be on board. Amrlei kedeshaymi betlas. Okay, back to that first expression. As per the appraisal of 3. 3 came along and evaluated and set a price at $1 million. So now the other fellow says, the buyer says, well, you know what, I'm not relying on them. I want another crew to come along and give us their opinion. I don't like these three people. I don't really like that. Not. I'll get another group of three. The Kimul Tfei who are more expert, and will determine the price based on their recommendation. Amar Papa, yeah, he's right. Dino Hu Demakiv, he has a right to wait up on it. Maska Flora Funa Berda Vishua. What do you mean? Memai Dahani Kimul Tfei. Who says the second crew is more expert than the first crew? Dil Mahani Kimul Tfei. Perhaps the first crew are more expert, knowledgeable than the second crew. See, there's no end. It's a never-ending proposition. And certainly, they're committed to the numbers presented by the first evaluation crew. Vilchasan, that's the halacha, Kravuna Rishua, that nobody can come and appeal their numbers. Okay, so we had a couple of stories where a person had committed to selling a certain property to a certain person, made a kinyan. However, there needs to be a pasak. There needs to have been a price that was set and determined for the commitment to go through. We had the story where he was, offered a larger amount, and he went with that one. He has a right to do so. And we also learned various lashonos of how to determine, the market value, the true value of a real estate. Says the Gemara, Notal asamashpech umadad letoich tzloichisa shalei b'tkechav. So we have a wine cellar again, who picks up the mashpech. That's the the funnel, and he pours through it into the container letoich tzloichisa shalei b'tkechav. So he finished with that customer, and then he tends to the next customer, who happens to be a Jewish customer. V'chazar madad, and he goes ahead and he pours through the thing letoich tzloichisa into the Jewish customer's container. So he's a Jewish wine seller. He sells to a guy, measures up for the yid. So the question is it a problem using the same funnel for both customers? So it depends. If there is some droplets of wine stuck on the bottom of this funnel from the previous customer, which happened to be a guy, then you can't use the same piece of equipment for the Yiddish customer. And the Gemara will explain what the problem is, because really, the wine as it was poured through was still kosher. So what's the issue? We'll see. Next case, Hama'ar Mikli al Kli. So here it's a goy actually, who's pouring some wine from one kli to the other. It's kosher wine. As she'ira mimenu muta, the wine that's still sitting in the upper kli is okay. Ve'she'ira l'toiche asur, as opposed to the wine sitting in the bottom kli. The wine that was poured into it is asur because it was poured by a guy. However, the wine still in the upper kli, since it's still in the kli, it's not affected by the guy's action. It's non-hasam. We have a Mishnah stated in Maseches Taharis regarding liquid, connectivity. Hanitzik. Nitzik is a gush of liquid, a flow coming through the air. Okay, a pour. Vakatafris, a similar type of configuration, but here it's sort of flowing on a surface, so it's flowing downward. Nitzuk is in the air, katafris is actually trickling on a surface. Mashkatefeyach. That means moisture. It's not wet enough to be considered real liquid. Rashi says it means to say that you touch it, you feel the moisture, but it's not enough so that it will get transferred to something else. Right? When you touch it and you go ahead and touch a different surface, that second surface didn't get wet because there was not enough liquid for the transfer. So it's a slight moisture. These three types of liquid configurations, Eino Yechibur, is not considered a connection. Rashi explains like this. So, let's say you're pouring. Okay, you're taking a pitcher, pouring some water out, which now is flowing through the air and hitting the the container on bottom. Comes along a person who's tamei and touches. While you're pouring, he touches the water on bottom. So that portion certainly becomes tummy. What about the upper portion? It's not a chibur, it's not a connection. So the upper portion is still tahar. Katafris, likewise, you have water trickling downward on the surface. You touch the bottom part, the upper part does not become tummy. Likewise, if it's mashka tefech, just slight moisture, and there is actual water touching that moisture, you touch the moisture with your tummy hand, it doesn't affect the water next to it. So there's no chibur for tumah, and likewise, there's no chibur for tahara as well. They're not considered connected. They're not considered one entity, one unit with respect to tahara. How's that? So Rashi explains regarding a mikveh. Suppose you have, a real mikveh here, and you have another little pool of water, which is not big enough for a mikveh. Doesn't have the required shear of 40 sa'ah. But there's a connection between that little puddle and the real mikveh. It's connected by way of a gush of water, a nitzuk, a katafris, a mashka tefech. It doesn't affect a connection. It doesn't make it one. In which case, if one does his tevilah in the little ditch on the side, doesn't qualify. He hasn't been in a mikveh because it's not connected to the mikveh. However, says the Mishnah, hashboiren, if it's just a still body of water. Rashi explains the word hashboiren means a crack in the ground. So it's like a pool of water standing still. It's not moving, it's not flowing, and it's real water. That can make a connection with respect to everything. Right? So if it's touching the mikveh, it becomes part of the mikveh. Right? And if it's touching another pool of water and a person's tummy touches that other pool, so this water becomes tummy as well. Basically, it's one and the same. If it's flowing, if it's in the air, if it's just a trickling, in a trickling state, then it's not one entity. It's moving, it's flying, right? But if it's standing still, it has the ability to connect to the water next to it. It's all one entity. Hashboiren is considered a chibur l'tumah u'letahara, both ways. Amar Rav Huna, despite us having just learned that a flow, a trickle, is not considered like standing water. Doesn't make a connection between standing water and the tummy and whatever. It's not set in place. It's in transit. It's in motion, right? But when it comes to the nesach issues, because it's if it's Avodah Zarah connotations, and it does make a connection. These three do make a connection. So basically, let's say nitzuk would be a person is takes a bottle of kosher wine, pours it into a kli which has yayin nesach in it. It's like the yayin nesach travels upwards, conducts upwards into the upper kli, and everything becomes yayin nesach. Even though, again, it's a nitzuk, it's in transit, it's flying, it's flowing. It's considered one and the same entity, and it all becomes asr. How do you know this is true? Where do you get this from? Is it because you inferred from that previously quoted Mishnah that in fact it is so, that yayin nesach is treated differently? Doesn't make a connection. Is not regarded as one and the same as the actual body of water. And we make a diak. With respect, l'tumah l'tahara, there it doesn't connect. Who do they have a chibur? But should we infer from there, lini yayin nesach, if it pertains to halachas yayin nesach, have a chibur? In fact, it's considered connected and one and the same. Is that your source from that Mishnah? Well, if that's the case, emos seifa. Let's proceed to the second part of the Mishnah that we just quoted, hashboiren. If in fact it's a proper body of water, chibur l'tumah l'tahara, it can connect the body next to it with respect to all kinds of consequences. But not all. It says tumah v'tahara. Shall we infer that only l'tumah v'tahara pertain to matters of purity? Huda v'chibur is considered connected ha'linin yayin nesach, but if it should pertain to anything connected to yayin nesach, lo v'chibur, it doesn't make a connection, which is hard to believe, since you just told me the yayin nesach is more severe. So we have conflicting inferences in the Mishnah. Here it seems yayin nesach is more severe. Here it seems it's less severe. When this happens, it's like a clash. We can't really know which one's, the part of the mission to focus on, and which one is just, sort of coming along secondarily, which is the real inference, which is just the secondary, and therefore you can't draw any conclusion from this Mishnah, one way or the other. But in any case, Rav Huna did take the position that yayin nesach is more severe, and these types of moving liquids can be considered one and the same as the yayin nesach that they touch, in which case everything becomes yayin nesach. Tanan. Okay, let's take a look at the Mishnah we just learned, and perhaps find a source for this halacha of Rav Huna that nitzuk is considered a chibur for yayin nesach. Tanan, natal es hamashpech, right? The wine cellar grabbed the funnel, umadad l'toich slichisei shlev kechamon. So first he poured it in for the guy, v'chazar madad l'soich slichisei yisrael, and then he poured it into the Jewish customer. Im yesh ba'keves yayin asur, if there's some wine droplets on the bottom of the funnel, then the Jewish customer is in trouble. Now, how did that wine become affected? How did it become tainted? These traces of wine on the bottom of the funnel, b'mai kamitzra, why did it become asr? It never touched the guy or even the guy's wine. Right? First he poured through it to the guy's container, but it was suspended mid-air. It never actually touched the guy, right? And then he took it and used it for the Yisrael. Oh, lav b'nitzuk. The only way is through nitzuk, because this funnel was used to transfer through it, the gush of wine, the flow, the current that was going into the guy's barrel, which eventually became usher when it hit the guy's barrel, right? Part of that flow, part of that nitzuk was coming through the funnel at the time, which tainted all that wine in the funnel as well. Hence, it cannot be used for kosher wine. Shmamin and nitzuk chibur. Clearly, we learn from here that nitzuk, in fact, is a connection. Well, says the Gemara, not so quick. Tani Reb Chia. The truth is that Reb Chia had a brisa to explain this Mishnah, to explain this halach, and he added a very important fact. The reason why the funnel became tainted by the wine on bottom, the wine beneath it, wasn't through nitzuk, wasn't through remote control. It got slapped, it got hit, by the wine in the container beneath it. Basically, when it filled, the wine level rose up until it actually bumped into the bottom of the funnel, and that wine was real yayin nesach. It was a true connection. It wasn't just a remote connection. Well, says the Gemara, okay, so now we can infer the opposite. Reb Chia explained it this way. Doesn't that indicate to us that in the absence of direct contact, there would be no issue of nitzuk? The mere flow wouldn't create an issue, in contrast to Rav Huna. So it's actually returning something which we figured was a proof to Rav Huna as an actual contest on Rav Huna. If there was no contact by the water beneath it, by the wine beneath it, would be no issue. Perhaps you can now conclude the opposite. But other than direct contact, just a flow would not be considered a connection. Well, not necessarily. Certainly you know that if the wine rose up and actually bumped into the funnel, then it's certainly a problem. Of course it's asr. Nitzuk tiboy, but we still perhaps can leave nitzuk up in the air. We're not sure. Rav Chia was sure that if there was direct contact, he's in trouble. But anything less than that, well, it's still up in the air, unresolved. Tashma, let's try to prove it from the other halacha in the Mishnah. Amara mikli likli. So, at this point, we figure it's a yid a Yisrael who's doing the pouring. He's pouring from his kli to the kli of the guy, which has, yain nesach. Hamara mekli lekli. What's the status of the wine that's in transit? Es shema'ara mimenu mutter. So the wine is still in the bottle on top and the barrel on top is okay. Okay, so that's the halacha of the Mishnah. That wine is still safe. Let's make an inference, a diuk. Ha devene veni. Also, what about the wine that's in transit, mid-air? That's now connected to the wine on bottom. That's already usher. Shema mino nitzuk chibur. Clearly we see a nitzuk makes a connection. And that's why only the wine actually in the kli is safe. But anything that's part of that flow is usher. Nitzuk chibur says, if that's the case, and nitzuk makes a connection, I feel the gavi demon and amalitzer. So then even the wine, the gavi demon, which is inside the upper container, should still be usher because it's all one flow. Halakasha, the answer could be like this. The makatev katufe. What happened was, he poured, but a little at a time, chunk at a time. Right? So he jolted the bottle, wine left, and he pulled back, so there's no connect. He disconnected himself from that flow. So instead of pouring, continuously, in an uninterrupted manner, he threw it in a choppy manner. So only the wine that's actually part of that flow and connects to the wine on bottom is called nitzuk, becomes asur. Not so the wine within the bottle on top, which is now disconnected. But in any case, you can still prove from here that nitzuk is a chibur. That explains why the wine that's mid-air, that's connected to the wine on bottom, is asur. Says the Gemara of l'tamech. Now according to you, amos safe. Are you telling me that the wine it's in this flow is asur? Amos safe. Let's move on to the next part of the Mishnah, where it says es she'ero l'toicho de asur. Right, the Mishnah says that the wine already contained in the container below is asur. Let's make it diuk. Only that's asur. Anything above that, even though it's headed to the kli and connected to the kli, hadevene veni, anything in between the two kalim, even though it's a nitzuk, it's the flow whose bottom, part of that flow is touching the bottom kli. Shari is still okay. So you see, nitzuk is not a connection. So once again, we have conflicting inferences in the Mishnah. We're not sure which way to go. Lamha, leka, lamash minah. From this Mishnah, we can't really conclude either way. Not that the current of the nitzuk is a connection, nor that it's not a connection. Tashma, let's bring a raya from a brayso. Ha'ma'ora mechaves labar. So a fellow was pouring from a barrel into a cistern, into a pit, a storage pit, where there was already yain nesach. Kiluach hayored misvas chaves ulamata asur. So the kiluach, which is the current, the flow of wine, once past the lip of the barrel, meaning anything beyond the barrel, right, on its way down, is asur. And again, we presume because of its connection to the wine and the pit, which is asur, that isur conducts upwards and affects the entire flow. We see nitzuk is chibur. Says the Gemara, no, Torah Gemara, Rav Sheshes explain that this brayso is not speaking about a Yisrael who's pouring. Actually, it's a guy, as we explained back in the Mishnah, right? But we're speaking about a guy who's doing the pouring. And the issue is not because the wine is connected to the yain nesach and the pit. No, the asim mikaychay. Chachamim banned this wine because it's being handled by a guy. It's being poured out mikaychay, through his energy, through his doing. Even though there's no direct contact with that wine. So any wine that's been poured out is asur. Well, says the Gemara, we're speaking about the guy who's doing the pouring. I feel even the wine inside the barrel that he's handling, that he's holding, Nami mitzvah should also become effective. The fact is he's pouring it, the fact he's handling it. Well, says the Gemara, not so far. Wine which is sort of moving around by the guy's action without direct contact with the wine, right? It's only asur midrabanan because it can lead to, more direct contact. So we limit that isra hude nafek levaroi, the wine that actually exited, that left the barrel on its way down through the guy's pour, gazru b'rabban rabbanan disallowed it because you see it, it's visible, it's accessible, and it came about through the guy's pouring. It's asur. But the wine's still within the barrel, which hasn't been exposed and poured out, even though it's been handled by the guy by way of the barrel that he's moving around. Because Rabban did not make gzera and did not make it asur. Continues the Gemara with another episode relating to the Jewish wine sellers with their non-Jewish customers, teaching them how to avoid any issue with the Ayin Nesach. Amrlu Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda turned and spoke to these lahanu, those savyasa, the Jewish wine sellers. He told them like this: Ki kailisu chamra. When you measure up the wine, when you transfer the wine to the to your goyish buyers, be careful. Katfi, katufi. So this is similar to what we said before. You got to cut off the flow. Ensure there's no uninterrupted flow from your barrel into the goyish container, because he holds that nitzuk is a chibur, and you're going to affect everything within your barrel. So pour it in a choppy, cut off fashion. Drop it a little, pull back, drop, pull back, right? This way, there's never a connection between your barrel, the wine within your barrel, and the container on bottom. Inami, another option would be, toss it from a distance. Sort of toss the liquid from a distance. Naptsi, naputse. Instead of standing over there and pouring it down, make your barrel sort of level with the container and toss it upwards and sideways. This way there's absolutely no continuity. There's no connection between the two, the contents of the two kelim. This way you're safe from any issues of yayin nesach. Amarlu Rava. Rava turned lahanu shefachai, to those Jewish workers who would be the ones pouring the wine from one kli to the other. And again, he told them a similar advice: kishavchisu chamra, when you pour your wine from one kli to the other. And now we're speaking that they're both belonging to a yid. There's no issue of yayin nesach per se at this point, but there were Goyish workers in the area. Be careful that you don't, have the guy do this job. It's a job that only a yid can do. Kishavchisu chamra, when you pour your wine from one container to the other, be careful. Don't allow the guy to give you a hand. Do because you might not realize. You might forget. And you'll leave the kli in the hands of the guy. In which case, the wine will be transferred by way of the guy's act of pouring and becomes asur. So we see from this Gemara that in fact, if he would not abandon the kli in the hands of the guy, if he would be still holding on to the kli, even if the guy's helping him, that's still okay. Right? The Eid is actually doing the pour, and the guy just giving him lending a finger. It's considered primarily an act of Yisrael, and it's okay. The problem is you might absentmindedly just leave it on his hands. He'll complete the task, and that's a problem. Okay, now we move on to the story of the siphon. Siphon is that sort of double-sided pipe. So it's used to siphon liquid, transfer liquid from one kli to the other. So let's say you have a big container or a barrel of wine. So you have this double-sided, like a V-shaped pipe, overturned V, as is illustrated on the left side of the margin here. So one side, it's a hollow pipe, right? One side is inserted into the source barrel of wine. That's the gishta. Ubas gishta is a daughter of the gishta, so that's the secondary pipe coming from the other side, and that's also hollow. And you put that into your container, and you sort of, by way of suction, you suck out the air, create a certain like a vacuum, right? So first you insert one side into the liquid, and you suck until you suck out all the air, and then the wine just starts flowing on its own into the new container. right? Because of the vacuum, the pressure of just, the vacuum, so it just keeps on filling with wine and keeps on flowing out the other way. How does this relate to Yain Nesach? Abu Gabra, there was a story of a fellow, the Asik Chamra. So he was in the middle of transferring the wine through this siphon apparatus. Begishta baskishta. Okay, so again, he had one end of this double-sided V, inserted into the pipe above, and he arranged for the wine to flow through the other side into the container below. Along comes a guy. And he placed his hand. He touched the outlet where the wine was flowing out into the new container. Asrei Rabba lekule chamra. So certainly the wine below becomes asr because it's now mixed with yain, but even the wine above, meaning in the source container, is asr. Why? Some say it was Rav Ada Mamasna who turned to Rav L'Rava. Some say it was Ravina who addressed Rav L'Rava. But why? How did the content of the upper kli become forbidden? Benitzuk? Is it because of the nitzuk concept? Because it's all one flow, and now when he touches the bottom of the flow, everything, even above it, becomes asr. Shamas mina nitzuk chibur. Do you mean to say that nitzuk is a connection? No, says the Gemara, you don't have to say that. Shani hasam. This case is very different. The kuli chamra, all the wine in the source container is headed for the container below. The kuli chamra, agishta baskishta gar. It's all being drawn after this siphon machinery. Right? So it's all one continuous unit of wine. So although the guy merely touched the far end, the outlet, the wine coming through the other side, but it's as though he touched the wine within this siphon, and by extension, everything within the source barrel, which was protruding, which was providing the material for this flow. It's all one continuous unit of liquid, because it was all headed in that direction. In which case, it's all yain nesach. Here's another similar type of case. A kanishkinin is it's a container with many straws, so to speak, many faucets. So many can actually drink at once. Right? The picture, it's like a container with many spouts. So you can have 5-6 people drinking at the same time. And now there was wine in the, of course, in the container. And you have a guy and a yid drinking at the same time. Is that okay? Yeah, because as long as the guy is just drawing out, that's okay. The wine within the kli is unaffected, and you see, it's different than the previous case, where the guy's contact of just a drop at the end makes everything usher. Here it's very different because you have to actually suck it out, as opposed to the Kanishkin system, the previous system where it was just already set up and it's just flowing on its own. Here, the customers, the drinkers have to actually actively suck for the wine to come out. As soon as he stops, that's it. It's not going to come out anymore. So sure, whatever he sucks and drinks is yain nesach. It's tam yainam, whatever, but whatever's still beyond his reach is kosher wine, which allows a yid on the other side of this kanishkanin to draw and drink. So again, kanishkanin shari, it's okay. So a yid and a guy can actually drink at the same time. Now, that's only true the Kadem Pasak Yisrael. So after they finished drinking, who stopped first? The Yisrael. Okay, so we both drink at the same time. The Yid stopped. It's okay. Avokadam pasak. But if the guy stops first, that's a problem, because now when he stops, the wine which had already been up by his mouth, which already touched his mouth, trickles black into the kli, which makes everything usher. What? So that's different. It says the Gemara, Rabbi Bar Huna actually implemented this halacha. Ikla lebeir shkuz. He came to the house of the household of the head of the community in Bavel, and he issued a verdict in favor of this type of activity. Surely allowed them lemishta to drink bekinishkinin using this apparatus. Ikadam Rasamsa, he himself did it. Rabbi Bar Huna Gufi himself ishti drank bekinishkinin using this apparatus without any concerns of yayin nesach. Okay, so we had a couple of stories regarding some real estate deals. It's not a commitment until there's a pasak, as we find in the case of the produce, case of the yayin nesach. We have the halacha regarding, proper appraisal, what's considered a binding appraisal. We moved on to a wine cellar dishing out his wine to the Jewish and non-Jewish customers, how to go about it. There's an issue of nitzuk, which according to Rav Huna, nitzuk is chibur. Rashi says, v'chein halacha, that's how we paskin. We discussed these two types of apparatuses, the gishta bas gishta, which creates this continuous flow, which is considered a connection. It makes it all into one unit, as opposed to the kanishkinin, where the guy is allowed on board, provided there's no actual mix of yayin nesach in the container. Up until that point, Yisrael can drink along without any concerns. All the best, you're not tzlach.